Welcome and good morning to all of you B.Sc first year students of Fishery Science. Students, in last part we are studying the important aspects of our syllabus. In part first we are studying cardiovascular system of Wallago. Wallago, these are to be performs a circulatory system, and this circulatory system is the single circulation. Heart is to be possesses venous heart, and heart of Wallago or the circulatory system of Wallago, these are to be for our convenience, for our sake, differentiated into different four parts, in which the first part we have started structure and working of heart. We have seen again the first part of heart, that is the sinus venosus, as well as position and shape of heart. All these are to be studied in part first. Then during this part second we have studied the next point, next part of heart. Usually heart of Wallago is true two chamber and false four chamber. True two chambers are auricle and ventricle, and false chambers are sinus venosus and bulbous arteriosus. First we have seen studying, that is sinus venosus. Now in this part we have seen the next part as auricle, ventricle and bulbous arteriosus. The first part auricle. First part auricle. The auricle lies in front of the sinus venosus and above the ventricle. Where auricle these are to be present, where auricle these are to be for, auricle these are to be lies in front of the sinus venosus and above the ventricle. The auricle is irregular in shape and has small ill-defined. The auricle is irregular shape, no confirmed shape, no specific shape, but it is to be irregular. Different shapes these are to be occur in these. Auricle is irregular in shape and has small ill-defined projections along the anterior and lateral margins. Along the anterior and lateral margins of this auricle, ill-defined projections these are to be occur. Ill-defined projection these are to be found. Its walls are thin. Auricle's walls are thin, spongy, and these auricle, its wall of auricle is to be thin, spongy. The central part of the auricular lumen is without muscular partitions. Central part of auricle lumen is without muscular partitions, hence has a large auricular cavity. Due to the muscular partition these are to be not present. Due to the muscular partition these are to be not occur in the auricle, hence auricle is to be a large cavity. The auricle opens ventrally into the ventricle. Auricle these are to be open into the ventricle by a opening, and that opening is called as auriculoventricular opening, or it is also called as auriculoventricular aperture. The aperture is present in between auricle and ventricle. The aperture opening is to present in between auricle and ventricle. That aperture, that opening is called as auriculoventricular aperture. And this auriculoventricular aperture, these are to be guarded, these are to be protected by a wall. By a wall, that wall is called as auriculoventricular wall. This auriculoventricular wall, these are to be allow to flow the blood only one direction, to flow the blood from only one way, from sinus venosus to auricle, auricle to ventricle. Means this wall, when once blood these are to be enter from auricle to ventricle, then this wall these are to be closed. Means backward flow from ventricle to auricle is to be not permitted, not done in the heart. That's why this wall these are to be important. This wall is present. Wall opening is present in auricle and ventricle. That opening is called as auriculoventricular opening or aperture, because it is to be asked for MCQ. It is asked for MCQ. The wall is present in between auricle and ventricle. That wall is called as dash. Or the auriculoventricular aperture guarded by which wall? It is to be guarded by auriculoventricular wall. Auricle these are to be then over and next part these are to be start. It is called as ventricle. Means auricle lies in front, next part is called as the ventricle. See the figure. See the figure of this heart. This is the generalized first figure. Remember, first figure is the heart of Wallago, which is to be red color, and in second figure, pink color, it is the heart of generalized heart. It is the generalized heart of a bony fish. See that. Sinus venosus, these are to be dilates, follows into the next part, that is called as auricle, and auricle, then these are to be open into the ventricle, and then these are to be open into the bulbous arteriosus. In this is the sinus venosus, this is the auricle, then side portion ventricle, and this is the bulbous arteriosus. See in this figure, this is the sinus venosus, this is the auricle, this is the ventricle, and side portion, these are called as bulbous arteriosus. These side duct, it is called as jugular vein. It is called as a jugular vein. Then ductus quiveri or common cardinal vein, and this is the hepatic vein. Hepatic portal vein or the hepatic vein, means all these sinus venosus, it is to be collect blood from jugular vein, it is to be collect blood from common cardinal, as well as it is to be collect blood from the hepatic vein. Blood these are to be pass, blood these are to be flow only one direction. From blood these are to be collect to these hepatic vein, ductus quiveri and jugular vein, and enter into the sinus venosus to auricle to ventricle, and ventricle to bulbous arteriosus. In this fashion, blood these are to be flows. Which direction? In this direction, just I have drawn a arrow, this arrow. In this direction, blood these are to be passed, these are to be flow. Backward flow, these are to be avoided, prevented due to wall which is to present in between these organs. Such type of blood flowing, these are to be seen, these are to be. First sinus venosus, then auricle, and from then auricle to ventricle. Next part of the heart chamber, that is the ventricle. Ventricle is a small, more or less thick. Ventricle is a small, more or less thick chamber. With a small and narrow cavity. This ventricle is small, more or less thick chamber. Auricle is the thin chamber, but space is to be large, spacious. Here chamber is to be thick with small and narrow cavity. Narrow cavity means it is to be exact opposite to the auricle. Auricle, these are to be with thin chamber, no cells these are to present, hence the space is to be more. Here the thick chamber, small and narrow cavity, it opens into the bulbous arteriosus by the opening. That opening is called as ventriculo-bulbar aperture. Ventriculo-bulbar aperture or ventriculo-bulbar opening. And this ventriculo-bulbar opening is to be again guarded by a hole. That hole is called as a semilunar hole. Important. It is also asked for MCQ. Semilunar hole, the hole is present in between. Ventricle and bulbous arteriosus. That hole is called as semilunar hole. And opening is present. That opening is called as ventriculo-bulbar aperture. Ventriculo-bulbar aperture means the ventricle small, more or less thick chamber, narrow cavity, and it opens into a bulbous arteriosus by opening ventriculo-bulbar opening and guarded by a hole. It is called as semilunar hole. Ventricle opens anteriorly into the bulbous arteriosus. Then ventricle, these are to be opened into the bulbous arteriosus. Bulbous arteriosus is the next part, means the two chambers are auricle and ventricle. Then bulbous arteriosus. Again, the bulbous arteriosus is well developed, elongated and conical structure. Bulbous arteriosus is well developed, elongated and conical structure, about half the total length of the heart. Bulbous arteriosus is to be about half of the total length of the heart and it has a swollen base. This bulbous arteriosus is to be half to the heart length, means how much length of heart is to be occur. To this half length is the bulbous arteriosus and its base is to be swollen. This bulbous arteriosus is to well developed, elongated and conical structure about half of the length of the heart and it is to be swollen base. Its walls has two layers. As outer thinner layer and inner thicker layer. Outer thin layer of bulbous arteriosus and inner thick layer is to be found. The inner surface of the bulbous arteriosus bears oblique longitudinal muscular ridges. The inner surface of the bulbous arteriosus bears oblique longitudinal muscular ridges. That ridges is called as trabeculae. Or it is also called as trabeculae. Trabeculae is nothing but the inner surface of the bulbous arteriosus and this inner surface of the bulbous arteriosus bears oblique longitudinal muscular ridges, oblique longitudinal muscular folds and this oblique longitudinal muscular fold is called as trabeculae. It is called as the trabeculae. One dorsal and one ventral trabeculae are more prominent and bigger than the rest. In this bulbous arteriosus, that is one dorsal and one ventral trabeculae are more prominent and bigger than the rest trabeculae. This trabeculae or this muscular ridges, these are to be present. One is the dorsal, which is prominent, and one is the ventral, which is also prominent. These trabeculae, these are to be larger, prominent, and as compared to the rest of the trabeculae. Which is to be found, which is to be seen. Short ventral aorta distributes blood to gill capillaries for oxygenation by 4 pairs of afferent branchial arteries. A short ventral aorta, these are to be distribute, just dilate from the bulbous arteriosus, and from bulbous arteriosus this ventral aorta, these are to be short, and this ventral aorta, these are to be distribute blood to gill capillaries for oxygenation by 4 pairs of afferent branchial arteries. Oxygenated blood is collected by 4 pairs of efferent branchial arteries into dorsal aorta, and this dorsal aorta, these are to be again which sends their branches to all parts of the head and body. Principal veins include paired anterior and posterior cardinals. Principal veins include paired anterior and posterior cardinals. Hepatic and renal portal systems are both present. With this structure of heart, these are to be seen, means just next to the ventricle, bulbous arteriosus, and the bulbous arteriosus is to be then followed. A next part, it is called as short ventral aorta. This short ventral aorta, these are to distribute blood to gill capillaries, distribute or supply blood to the gills for purification, for oxygenation by 4 pairs of vessels. That 4 pairs of vessels, it is called as afferent blood vessel. These afferent blood vessels, these are to be carry the impure blood for purification to the gill lamellae. In gill lamellae, blood, these are to be purified. Gaseous section, these are to be takes place. Carbon dioxide, these are to be diffused, and dissolved oxygen, these are to be absorbed. Then blood is to be purified. Blood is to be oxygenated. Then this oxygenated blood is to be collected by 4 pairs of vessels. These 4 vessels are called as efferent branchial vessels or efferent branchial arteries. Then these efferent branchial arteries supply their blood into the dorsal aorta. Then these dorsal aorta send their branches to all part of the head and body. Means dorsal aorta and lateral artery, they can supply the pure blood to whole body. Principal veins include which carry the impure blood. These principal veins are the paired anterior and posterior cardinals. Principal veins are the hepatic veins. Principal veins are the renal portal system, these are to present, and in arterial system, that is arteries and lateral aorta. With this we have seen the structure of heart. Then we have seen next part, that is working of heart. With this we have complete the structure of heart of W.attu. Heart of W.attu, these are to be made up of 4 chambers, comprises 4 parts, 4 chambers, eyes, sinus venosus, auricle, ventricle and bulbus arteriosus. Then next part, that is working of heart, we have seen, we have studied the next part. Thank you all of you.